Here's the eternal story of Voltron. You play your guy, suit up, then it gets squashed. Fine. We build up, try again the next turn, then someone else squashes it. And now your guy costs 1,000,000 mana and everyone else gets to play but you. Or you suit up your guy, protect your guy, take one person out, and now they're mad all night because you alpha strike them. The Voltron strategy has a real problem in Commander. Kind of like Kalia or Atraxa, which are classic kill on sight commanders, Voltron is just in a weird spot. You're hyper vulnerable to removal, and the only way to play around it is to go even deeper on the alpha strike route, which means getting even more people mad. So what do we do aside from stuffing our decks with 14 protection spells to protect the commander, and playing Voltron once a night because winning with this strategy is too salt-inducing? And here's where this little guy comes in. The Vagabond from the board game Root. Root is Commander but good. It's a 4-player board game where each player plays a faction of woodland animals. The cats, the birds, the critters, and the Vagabond. Each faction has their own style of play and strategy, where the cats are building an industrial war machine, dominating the entire map with their army. The birds create legislature, a slow-moving engine of repeating rules and decrees that will snowball out of control, while the Woodland Alliance grows sympathy for the critters under the boots of these rulers. And lastly, the Vagabond is a single-player RPG in this map of politics and war. Each faction clashes and creates an intriguing game of strategy, much like a pod of commanders where different archetypes battle for supremacy with their own types of synergies. As you're probably connecting, the solo Vagabond is basically our equivalent of a Voltron commander going solo in a battlefield of elves, goblins, and ad nauseam. And unlike Commander, in Root the solo Vagabond is actually an extremely strong choice, where if given enough preparation like Batman, the Vagabond will end the game victorious. So what makes the solo Vagabond so good in this game of war? And how can we apply that learning to making Voltron decks better and, more importantly, more fun to play for everyone? After researching competitive Root strategy, yes it exists and it's not called C-Root, shame, I applied my findings into a classic Voltron commander deck, Uril, and play tested it on MTGO to great success. And in this video, I'm going to share why I learned from Root and what you could add to your own Voltron decks. And I couldn't have designed it as well without my deck building website commandertemplate.com. Commander Template takes our entire deck building series with all the research numbers and buckets and creates an easy to use deck builder where you can pick your commander, fill in the categories, find cards through themes, or save Scryfall tags to continue searching for new cards, and find cuts based on a mana curve. Today's Voltron deck was genuinely something out of my usual style, so the website actually really helped to finish it out, and that's also why I had to play test on MTGO. Anyways, let's talk about some critters. The first thing to learn and remember is commander damage represents an inevitable clock in a commander game. No matter if an opponent has infinite cards, infinite life, infinite shuffling effects to never deck out, as long as they don't have a Platinum Angel, 21 points of commander damage is Dunzo Manifesto. If given enough space, the Voltron deck will win. This reframes our concept of Voltron from being an aggressive strategy into a strategy of inevitability. Ironically, the longer the game goes, the better Voltron gets, but only if we build our decks to leverage that fact. Almost like in a game against Infect. Once you put commander damage on the board, it doesn't matter if your opponents wipe your board, kick your teeth in with removal, they are always still points away from death. The Voltron victory condition is untouchable. Of course, the opponent could be playing Infinite Fogs, Maze of Ifs, and straight up Humility with a grip of 50 removal spells. We could never win that game. But as long as we remember that Voltron is a game of inevitability, we can design the decks to control the game to our benefit. So back to the world of Root. The Vagabond has a few main strategies that will apply to our own Voltron design. When you sit down with a Voltron commander, the table knows you're gonna be a problem. That's just public face-up knowledge that eventually someone needs to kick your teeth in and send you back to the Stone Age. And it creates a question. And the question for the table is, who's gonna do it? We already know that most commander players don't play enough removal, so when you play a Voltron commander, you pull the table into a game of resource chicken, because someone spending removal on you is spending mana in a card not progressing their own game plan, or stopping someone else while the two other players get to jam their roaming thrones and take the game over after. The Vagabond and Root plays very similarly, where the Woodlands knows that the Vagabond can't hoard too much stuff, because it's the stuff that makes the Vagabond like a raccoon god with a hyper-productive action economy. But in a game where action and resource economy can get really tight at the highest level, spending tempo to shoo a raccoon away might be the difference between a game deciding cat or mouse. So what do we do with this knowledge? We call this the Vagabond Dilemma, and the entire Vagabond Dilemma hinges on the fact that Voltron Vagabond will be a problem. But the problem is completely public knowledge. In Root, the Vagabond leverages what's called the pacifist strategy. The Vagabond intentionally avoids acquiring or crafting a sword, and without an active sword, they are mechanically incapable of initiating battle and opponents cannot force them into battle. And that's the important part, because here, the strategy is to control the narrative of how you engage with the table. The Vagabond then proceeds to win the game through questing and aiding allies and getting other victory points. Now, of course, here's where Root differs, because Root has other ways for the Vagabond to score victory points, and in Commander, we eventually do need to deal 21 points of commander damage or reduce our opponent's life total to 0, or else we're lying about the Voltron archetype. But the key learning here is the pacifist strategy is our version of playing Possum. As long as we don't draw aggro and play just under the line of threat with the table never wants to spend cards to delete our commander or mess with our stuff, because ultimately, Voltron sucks, right? There's no way our wimpy little unequipped Voltron commander could be nearly as strong as Y'shtola over there with her scary commander drawing cards and draining her life. Now, being a little Possum Vagabond doesn't mean not doing anything, because ultimately we need to be spending mana, playing spells, and developing a board. So the question is, how do we spend our mana? And here's where the deck building starts to shift, because instead of building swords, you're really brewing tea. The Vagabond looks like it's puttering around the edges of the map, crafting boots and trading trinkets. Harmless, right? But every pot of tea it stashes multiplies how many actions the Vagabond can take the next turn. 3 actions will become 6, 6 becomes a dozen, and the table won't worry about all that tea, because none of it looks like a threat until your turn starts to take many minutes longer. And how we need to shift casual Voltron is we need to spend our mana in turns to help compound our late game. We need to focus our setup with draw engines, haste enablers, and secondary threats, so when the table is done dealing with the big scary Dragon, your Raccoon God can come in with haste and swing a big cartoon hammer at the blue player's face. Like in this MTGO game where I set up my early turns with a Kodama and an Armadillo Cloak to ramp up for the late game while the table fights each other, and I have an Always Watching to make it hard to attack me, a Bitter Work, and lastly a Rhythm of the Wild cast before the turn I want to Uril someone with a hand of Tempest Technique and Unquestioned Authority. They rarely touch my stuff because I never gave them a reason to, and designed the deck to spend each turn setting up for the right moment. But there's actually even more to the strategy, because taking the form of a possum is only the first step. So, we're playing one central legend on a tabletop of grand armies and board states, yet I'm telling you we can't be too scary. So what's the deal here? The deal is, why do the work yourself when others can do it for you? If our job is just to connect and deal 21 points of damage or reduce our opponent's life total, we don't have to think of the game as trying to deal 120 points of damage spread across 3 players. We can let them fight amongst themselves and clean up the scraps later, and that's exactly how a Vagabond player farms the table, despite being just a little furry guy. The Vagabond can weaponize interplayer conflict, like when the cats and birds inevitably go to war because the cats need wood and the birds are dicks. The Vagabond will now have a wide amount of pickings of undefended territory in the woodlands to clear for victory points. The point is, the Vagabond isn't just a sword-wielding raccoon. The point is that a good Vagabond player plays the table as a follow-up to recognizing that nobody wants to deal with them under the Vagabond Dilemma. And this actually unlocked the most interesting strategy I never considered in Voltron: By playing politics cards like Monarch and Goat, we can force the table into fighting each other to scrap for a card draw with the Monarch token, while we set up for a later turn and pick windows where we want to be the problem. You can learn a lot more about these gaslighting concepts through my Bolas Roleplay deck tech, and you can watch it at work on Shuffle Up and Play. But by playing into the politics of the table and controlling threats, you can create game states where it's even welcome that you exist as the inevitable sword that will cleave the arch enemy from the table. And an even better tactic is to feed the player who you know has the most answers to you, so the table takes them out for you first, leaving themselves vulnerable to 10 inches of equipment stacked on your guy the turn after. Like in this game where I played Queen Mother Ramonda to introduce Monarch, where the players then took it and then constantly attacked each other to take it back, leaving themselves open for me each turn, accelerating the game much faster for me to reduce life totals, ironically for me to lose against a Voltron deck at the end. The folly of being too squirrely with your politics is forgetting that eventually, and they always will, the table will call the exterminator. They'll play that board wipe, the betrayal bounce to shrink your commander to losing combat. And that's the last lesson from Root, is to design for recovery. A table that knows what's up will know better than to let the D&D raccoon run around unimpeded. But the thing that makes the Vagabond so difficult to deal with is they're immune to table control. Root is a game of building engines to unlock more action and resources. Cats build more infrastructure, birds have more decrees, and the Woodland Alliance creates hubs of resistance. Each of these factions can be controlled by how the game plays out and severely impacted when a piece of their engine is removed, much like when a Super Friends deck gets their Atraxa removed or an Elves deck losing their Priest of Titania. But the Vagabond, despite sometimes getting bullied JoJo style, has their entire infrastructure off the map, safe within a satchel nobody can touch. They craft items that can be damaged but never destroyed, and the Vagabond forms relationships with other factions that help score victory points that other factions cannot disrupt. The Vagabond has one-way scaling. They keep going up while everyone else fights amongst themselves, especially if they're playing the table. In Magic terms, it's like if the equipment is indestructible and you have emblems that give effects to help you win. But obviously, that's not how Magic the Gathering works, and the recommendation is not to play Darksteel Forge to protect your wares. The problem with Voltron is we feel forced to play a game that is subject to table control. Even if you're not the threat, your Cloud Strife with a measly warrior sword will still get wiped off the table by a Wrath of God even if it wasn't the main threat that needed to go. Your aura on your commander gets destroyed because someone needed an enchantment target off of a Decimate. The Vagabond reveals that as long as we have a strategy around which of our stuff breaks and how we recover from it, we are better protected against the chaotic whims of the table. For an aura deck, I opted to play more recursion effects to bring them back once it's Uril's turn to finish the game. But playing more haste enablers like Rhythm of the Wild or Invigorating Hot Springs also makes sure that even if my Uril gets taken off the board, he can swing immediately the next turn I decide to play him. Analyzing the strategy of how the Vagabond is played in a great board game like Root, we can learn how to build and play Voltron strategies better where we always under the threat from a single source of plowshares. By manipulating the optics of our board and staying right under the threat, or pushing the threat onto our opponents through politics and building for recovery, we can still suit up a legend and participate in a political game that doesn't involve making someone extra salty. I don't know, they'll always be mad about something. Deck building Uril was actually quite difficult because of how old and underpowered this commander is compared to some of the modern Voltron commanders. Commander template generally made it a lot easier and fun to deck build Uril while exploring these ideas because I could add a Monarch Matters theme via the Scryfall O tag and see all the cards available to me in Naya that I might not have considered before, or my new favorite Scryfall tag I like using, which is Hate Attacker, to find defensive cards like Mangara or Aurelia. I highly recommend using the website and learning its tools so you can build better decks and find more interesting cards you might have not known about before. The deck list is in the description box below. If you're a Voltron master yourself and you've got tips and secrets for other Voltron players to play better, leave it in the comments below. But as usual, thanks for watching. Let me tell you the true raccoon way of playing Commander. Basically, what you do is you take all their expensive cards, then leave the store. So then next time you play, your deck's better, all right? But you didn't hear that from me. if you want to learn like other like wisdoms of how to deck build better, there's this video over here that's like about eating glue. I don't really know what it means. And then there's also like this video that's probably going to be good or bad. I don't know. I don't really work here. Okay. All right. Good to see y'all. All right. I'll see y'all next time.